So cold this morning, right? Anyone else love it? Like, I really like it. Right? Like, I got to pull out a jacket and I felt like I won the lottery. Like, I was so excited to wear layers and have to like put on extra clothes. My car said 39 degrees. I sent a text to my mom in Wisconsin and I was like, it's 39 degrees here. And she's like, it's 60 here. And I was like, oh, that's odd, right? It should be the other way around, but I love it. I love that it's cold. And I had another thought, but we were talking a minute ago and I was telling a few of you that I decorated for Christmas yesterday. I didn't mean to. I lost the battle. So I have 3 kids and a partner and we voted. They were like, do we want to decorate for Thanksgiving or Christmas? And I voted for Thanksgiving because that's my holiday. Brown's my favorite color. I love football and I love food. That day was made for me, right? And so I voted for Thanksgiving. Everyone else voted for Christmas. And so our house is now decorated for Christmas, except the outside, which is still decorated for Halloween. So we have like Halloween-ness going on at our house right now. It's a little strange, but yeah, Christmas everything. Red cups are out, so it's green. It's wild, right? Definitely feels like we're going into Christmas. Anyway, morning. So I want to keep going with this today. We'll keep going with chapter 12, and then we'll get into chapter 13. I mentioned this to you all a little while ago. We're doing interviews to hire somebody in psychology, and they're debating between Tuesday and Thursday next week is the day that they're going to do that. So if they decide to do it on one of those days, then we'll have a virtual class. So I'll give you like a video lecture or something like that to do. I'll let you know as soon as I know. They're debating between 2 days, depending on when the applicants can come. So it will be either Tuesday or Thursday, only one of them, thankfully. But I'll let you know. And luckily, we're in a good spot. We should get through this and then we'll get into personality disorders. So we're a little ahead, which will be fantastic if we have to miss part of a day. So hopefully, I'll know that really soon and I will let you know. And again, whatever day they pick, well, I'll give you a recorded lecture that I'll do. And that will be instead of like an in-person day. And it should just be the one day, which will be nice. So, I believe, so I made a note to myself that we finished the negative symptoms, but we didn't talk about this yet, right? Does that sound familiar? Okay, great. Thank you. So talk about positive symptoms and negative symptoms. And then we also have psychomotor symptoms. And this used to be its own category of schizophrenia, where people could have nothing but catatonic schizophrenia. And now it's just kind of absorbed into this whole group together. But psychomotor symptoms are when people have awkward movements, grimaces, odd gestures, or even like strange posturing that can happen. Remember Gerald, how he was kind of spinning his hair constantly? That would be a psychomotor symptom. People get stuck in what's called a catatonic stupor as well. And this is really fascinating and we don't really understand what's going on, but people almost get stuck like they're a statue. There was a video and I tried so hard to find it, but I haven't been able to find it. This guy, he was just walking and he stops and like 48 minutes pass and then he just keeps walking. Like people will just get in these random spots. They stop moving. They get stuck with their hand up in odd kind of postures like this. Call this a catatonic stupor is the name for this, or they get rigidity or posturing. And we don't really know what's going on. It's like they're severely dissociated from the world around them. And people won't respond to anything. They just sit there. And normally, like if you were to put your arm out, you don't have to do this, but if you put your arm out eventually, it starts to get heavy, right? Depending on how strong and fit you are. But after a while, like that muscle tone, you would drop your arm, you would lose that. People who have catatonic schizophrenia, it's almost like their arm gets stuck. And then you can almost move it like a statue and it'll just stay there. And we have no understanding as to why that's the case, but it definitely happens. Not the most common presentation, but it can definitely happen. Did you have a thought? Yeah. Oh my. Maybe. I mean, it would be hard to, you'd have to, I mean, it could be, right? With this, it usually what it is that people just, it's almost like there's a glitch, right? And they just get stuck in a position. So maybe or maybe not, I have to know a little bit more, but that's awful, right? But yeah, I'm not sure whether it be this or not. Yeah, we'll go here and then. Yeah. We don't, right? And so we've done like MRIs and fMRIs to try and see what's going on in the brain. And there's a lot of like underactivity in the brain. It's like the brain is almost dissociated. But the hard part is because people are so dissociated and cut off from the world, when you try and interact with them, they don't interact back. And then when you ask them about it later, because of the nature of the disorder, you know, sometimes people will say stuff like, well, the devil had his arms around me and so I couldn't move. You know, and so the accounts that we get later are often really unhelpful. So it's maddening. We don't really know what's going on during this period of time, but people are just completely cut off and dissociated from the world around them. Yeah. Yeah, so the catatonic stuff is specific to schizophrenia. The psychomotor agitation we saw in mania, you can see in depression, ADHD, but the catatonic, like getting stuck, not moving, not talking, it's very specific. Yeah.
It's related at all to I don't know if you've seen the movie Awakenings.
Yes, it's been a bit, but yeah.
Yeah. Is this kind of schizophrenia treatable?
Actually, I haven't seen, like, I've seen it. It's just been a long time. I don't remember it well enough. But I mean, it was a really interesting movie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's based off of Oliver Sacks' memoirs. His work with the drug L-DOPA and treating Venezuelan patients in psychiatric facilities in New York City.
Yeah.
So essentially, the L-DOPA rehabilitates people out of their catatonia to the point where they're semi-functioning or fully functioning.
Yeah.
As human beings, so they can be develop their sensible limbs and stuff like that. I was just wondering that if like something like this is readable, like this version of like I don't know, like.
Yeah, so there are antipsychotic medications, which we'll talk about later today, and they tend to be helpful for all of these symptoms, especially these ones as well. So yeah, it can definitely alleviate some of it, though sometimes people still have a degree of like private gestures or posturing, but it might not be as severe as like being fully dissociated like that. Yeah.
Like psychologists who like often schizophrenia were like, oh yeah, this is
Have the follow-up to that, but I think it's a really helpful kind of overview of some of this. We're talking about dopamine, those brain structures, some of the prenatal influences, right? A lot of biological stuff, right? The biggest culprits by far schizophrenia are these ones up here. There are a couple of other side ones, but these are by far the biggest. Yeah.
So like that's
Uh-huh.
Is it like does it jump to like an extremely high level, or does it like always start at base?
With like dopamine and such, do you mean? Or okay.
With like where you're like have schizophrenia.
It usually starts with that prodromal. So it's typically like a little bit gradual. It doesn't tend to be like a switch being flipped, right? It's usually more that like you have moments of like, I'm not sure what's real or what isn't. Is that I heard a voice, is that real or not, right? It tends to be something that is a little bit like gradual in onset, unless somebody experiences something very traumatic, in which case it can be kind of quickly out of nowhere. Or well, not out of nowhere, it would come from the trauma, but quick onset. It's usually much more gradual. So the other ones, and these are much less impacting, but they play a role. Freud talked a lot about something he called the schizophrenic mother, right? And I tried to find a picture of like a mom yelling at you, right? Someone who's like cold and angry and domineering, someone who might inspire schizophrenia in a child, right? In a way, Freud thought that the mom was so important, right? That everything goes back to the mother. And so he talked about how having a very cold, domineering mother could lead to schizophrenia. Now we've expanded on that since, and it's not necessarily the mother per se, but it could have something to do with the amount of expressed emotion that we have in a family. So if you have a family that has a lot of criticism and hostility and like negative emotionality, that is thought to be maybe a factor. It might be that diathesis stress piece, right? It might be the environmental influence that triggers the predisposition. So there is some evidence that the expressed emotion in the family, especially if it's very negative in nature, can play a role. And these sociocultural factors do play some kind of a role, but it's not super well understood. Much more prominent to talk about the biology, but there is a little bit of kind of sociocultural and psychological stuff that might influence or maybe even trigger a predisposition that's already there. So mostly biological with a few little side notes. And the whole idea of a schizophrenogenic mother is kind of outdated, but it was a very Freudian proposal and something that is still sometimes referenced. Some treatment stuff. Because of the nature of the disorder, this is a difficult disorder to treat, right? Therapy by itself doesn't work all that well alone. Typically, people need medication. And if you remember way back to chapter 1, like months ago at this point, we talked about how there was a shift that happened in like the 1900s to treating people more humanely. That was called milieu therapy, or like a different milieu approach. All the way back to like the 1900s, we tried to shift the way that we treated disorders like schizophrenia specifically. Rather than locking people away in awful, cruel, inhumane conditions, it was trying to create a climate that promotes respect and responsibility and meaningful activity. So that's something since like the mid-1900s that we've tried to do. And so viewing schizophrenia as a mental illness rather than things like possession or something mysterious has really helped with that. And a lot of people with schizophrenia do end up hospitalized at some point. And in these hospitals, we often use little things like token economies. And I guarantee every single one of you has had a token economy at some point in your life. You earn stickers on a chart and you could trade those in for something. My kids, they earn, they call them brag tags in their class. And so they'll come home and be like, I got 2 brag tags today, and they can save those up and trade them in for a prize. Or maybe it's a check mark or a point or a literal token. And then you save those up and you can exchange them for something that you want, right? Maybe it's a privilege or a prize or something like that. This is very commonly used in hospitalization situations to help people who maybe aren't functioning all that well learn proper ways of behaving, right? So we're going to reward you for proper and like good behavior by giving you points or tokens that you can exchange for something that you want. Really commonly used with children, but it's used a lot here with schizophrenia when people are hospitalized as a way of kind of keeping them on track and giving them a very concrete, tangible goal to try and accomplish. So just something to keep in mind. We try and have this like climate of promoting like meaningful activity, treating people with dignity and respect. And if hospitalized, maybe an economy program, but much more common than these are the medications. This is the #1 treatment for schizophrenia are antipsychotic drugs. Antipsychotic drugs fight psychosis, and psychosis and schizophrenia are in the same realm. So these are going to correct grossly confused or distorted thinking. And we've had these antipsychotic drugs since about like the 1940s, 1950s. Thorazine is probably the most famous of these, right? The oldest and like kind of most well-known antipsychotic drug. And these drugs as a group are very difficult to tolerate. Because of that, they're sometimes called neuroleptic drugs. And neuroleptic drugs, or these conventional antipsychotics, produce a lot of neurological symptoms as a side effect. People shake and they have tremors, like Parkinsonian-like side effects. We call these extrapyramidal effects, where people have shaking, grimaces, twisting, restlessness. These really can be very difficult drugs to tolerate and to get into the right dosage and concentration and combination. People can even have what's called tardive dyskinesia, these extrapyramidal effects that last even after the drugs have stopped. So just as a group, these neuroleptic drugs or conventional antipsychotics are hard for people to tolerate, but they can drastically reduce the symptoms of schizophrenia. So it's a little bit of like a weighing act, a balancing act. And some of the newer ones are quite a bit better. Right? We have what are called atypical antipsychotics in the last 20 years or so. And these ones are a little bit better, but again, still have a lot of the same side effects to them. It's really unfortunate because, people need these drugs in order to function, but then it causes a lot of other problems as well. And I have the follow-up to that other video. Let me play that for you. Common drugs. Again, now, as it stands now, if somebody went into get medication for schizophrenia, they would start them on one of these atypical antipsychotics, things like Abilify and some of the newer ones, Zyprexa and so on. There's a few that are like brand new or within the last like 15 years. The classic ones like Thorazine and some of the ones that they mentioned are older. They still work, they're still used, but their side effects are much, much higher. So again, it's a lot of trial and error of trying to find the right dose, the right medication where it reduces the symptoms of schizophrenia, but it's tolerable in terms of the side effects. So these are life-changing drugs. They're just very difficult to tolerate because of the side effects that they do cause, those extra pyramidal and like shaking Parkinsonian kind of side effects. Yeah.
How come sometimes psychologists use antipsychotics for people with like depression?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, for example, Abilify is used quite a bit for bipolar disorder, right? So sometimes when people have manic episodes that are very severe, they can actually hallucinate and have almost schizophrenia-like symptoms. So there is a disorder called schizoaffective disorder where people's emotional extremes are so severe that they border on psychotic. And so there are cases where we use antidepressants to help with things like that, or mood stabilizers to help with things like schizophrenia. And it's because they work on the same neurotransmitters, right? Dopamine was a culprit in depression. It's also a culprit in schizophrenia and anxiety. So there tend to be a lot of overlap between the uses of those drugs. That's a great question. One last note here. Therapy, as I mentioned, very difficult without medication, right? If someone isn't grounded in reality, therapy doesn't tend to be super helpful. So these drugs have really helped with that, right? Allowing therapy to be utilized a little bit as well. And we used to lock people up in institutions who had schizophrenia. And now we tend to do more deinstitutionalization, trying to treat people like in the community. Remember we talked about this in the beginning, that there were all these massive state hospitals all over the place, and a lot of them have been shut down or converted. My partner's out at Cal State Channel Islands today for a training, and I'm like, ooh, check it out for me, right? Is it creepy? Right? She said it just looks old, but I've never been out there, but that's one of the places that was converted. There's so many of them across the country. And instead of locking people away in these institutions, now what we try and do is treat them more through outpatient care, halfway houses or like group homes or crisis homes. If people have a lot of family support or community support, they tend to do quite well. If not, then we get what is sometimes called the revolving door syndrome. It's right here in this bullet, where people will get on a medication, they kind of get stable, and then we release them, and they go out into the world, and they stop taking their medication, the symptoms come back, then they have to go back into a facility, get back on the medication, get regulated, they're released. And this cycle happens over and over. It's like this revolving door of treatment where they're in and out of facilities. So the fact that we don't hospitalize people anymore is a good thing, but it's also mixed, especially with this disorder. Because of the nature of it, people need a little bit more care, a little bit more like supervision. And so if you don't have family members or support who help you with that, it can definitely be challenging. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there a solution to that, or is it more just like a slow process throughout the years?
Yeah, and the hard part is like we have a lot of homelessness, right? Schizophrenia and homelessness are very strongly correlated with each other. And some of that is by choice. People are paranoid, so they want to be off the grid, and they don't want to be able to be tracked. And so they choose that. And other people have fallen through the cracks because they're not receiving the proper care. And they've kind of become isolated from society. So it's definitely an issue. I mean, and even in CME, like there are like people who are homeless who have schizophrenia who like I see wandering the streets screaming at themselves or screaming at nothing all the time. It's something that's very present. And so unfortunately, a lot of it has to do with inadequate care. And some of it has to do with the nature of the disorder that like I'm so paranoid about the government that I don't want to be part of society. And that sometimes comes up as well. So yeah, it's a problem. There's a lot of homelessness and schizophrenia occurring together for a variety of reasons.
There's no way to try to get treated.
It's difficult because you can't force somebody, right? So if somebody doesn't want to receive treatment, they have the right to refuse treatment. But if they're not of sound mind, you actually can kind of get around that a little bit. But it would require a lot of money and effort that, is often used in other ways. Would it be nice? Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people who could use the treatment, but you can't typically force it on somebody unless they're like a danger to themselves and others. Any other thoughts or comments or stories, questions, anything else related to schizophrenia before we move on? Anything else at all? Okay. All right, so where we'll go from here then for the rest of our time is we will talk about start personality disorders. And this will take us a couple of days, but we'll start talking about them today. There's a lot of you who have characters for your paper that you suspect have a personality disorder. So hopefully this will be helpful for that. But we'll talk about, there are 10 of these, talk about each one of them. And they fall into 3 main clusters, which we'll talk about. And then we'll look at causes and treatment at the end, along with some problems. These disorders have a lot of problems. In essence, what we're saying is that your personality is the disorder, right? That your personality and everything about who you are is problematic. And that is a controversial thing to say. Yeah. Are they not on there? I might not have made them visible. Okay, hold on. Let me see if I can fix that really quick. Thank you for letting me know. They should be there, but I have to hit a button to make them where you can see them. And sometimes I forget to do that. Give me just a second. I'll go on there and double check. Thank you for telling me. Yeah, just a second. Like 57 clicks away, but I'll get there. Oops. Almost there. It should be viewable now. Someone, if you could double check. Is it there? Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know. Okay. Yeah, I have to hit this little like viewable thing and I always forget to do that. So thank you. Okay. So I want to mention really quickly before I forget, right? With these personality disorders, you're really only supposed to diagnose one of them. Right. So a couple of you have talked to me about this with your character. You're like, I don't know which one they have. There's a couple personality disorders. It looks like they have more than one. It's not a hard rule, but when it comes to these disorders, generally we only diagnose one of them. Right. So try and pick the one that fits your character the best. And then you could talk about inconsistencies. Movies don't always portray things accurately, of course. So you could talk about that a little bit. But in general, we have one personality. So we can only have one personality disorder. If you have more than one personality, then you have dissociative identity disorder, which we talked about earlier in the semester. So typically just one. And every single one of us has a personality, right? It's everything that makes you unique and different. It's your pattern of thoughts and feelings and behavior. It makes you different from every other person on the planet, right? And our personality is something that's very consistent and enduring. The person that you are now is pretty similar to the person you'll be 10 years from now and 10 years ago. You might have a little bit of changing depending on life events and the people around you, but we tend to be pretty consistent in our inner experiences and outward behavior that we express. Now, the key with personality, just personality in general, is that there's a flexibility to it. You might have preferences, but you're able to kind of be flexible and adapt to the world around you and what's going on. When people have a personality disorder, they lose that flexibility and they have a very like rigid and inflexible, maladaptive way of behaving and interacting with everyone. And it tends to be somewhat problematic. These disorders start very, very early. You can see evidence of them all the way into childhood, though we typically try not to diagnose them until someone is 18. Because as a teenager, your personality is still developing a little bit, right? You're still kind of figuring out who you are, a lot of identity shifts. And so we try not to diagnose these until someone is 18 years old or or older. And that's a hard rule with a couple of them and encouraged with most. So the essence, again, with all of these is that the way that you interact with the world and the people in it is very inflexible, and it's all kind of in one pattern, which can be problematic. And as I mentioned, there are 10 of these. There are 10 different personality disorders that fall into 3 clusters. And this would be a great short answer question for you, right? What are the 3 clusters of personality disorders? And they are ones that are odd or eccentric, dramatic, and then ones that are anxious in nature. And we'll talk about each one of them. I'll put up some key words for each one just to kind of help you keep them straight. But we'll talk about the different ones. There's a chart in your book that looks like this, that kind of organizes them for you. Again, 3 odd and eccentric ones, 3 anxious and fearful ones, and then 4 that are like dramatic and emotional. And we'll go through each one of them. And I have a couple of clips and things to kind of help keep them straight. But just know that there's a lot of issues with these, a lot of overlap, especially within groups, right? So within the odd and eccentric group, there's a lot of overlap between the 3, right? And so these are very controversial, but they're still recognized and diagnosed quite a bit. So we'll start with the odd ones, the odd personality disorders. These are ones that are characterized by like odd or eccentric behavior, things that tend to leave people isolated, right? Because they don't fit in with the world around them. So starting with paranoid. Paranoid personality disorder is someone who has a lot of like mistrust and suspicion in the world around them. They look for hidden meanings. They question the loyalty of people. A lot of those paranoid delusions that we talked about before, but less severe than schizophrenia. More global and pervasive, but less severe. So this person might have a lot of like distrust of the world around them, a lot of like conspiracy theory kind of stuff that leaves them pretty isolated. They don't tend to work well or trust others. So some things that we could put up here, we could say that they're often very suspicious. I just got the "don't be suspicious" stuck in my head. I'm like, no, get out. So now if you have it in your head too, you can join me on that. They're very mistrustful of others. They often think that other people have like a hidden agenda, that they're out to use them in some way. So they have unjustified doubts about the loyalty of people. A lot of doubt about loyalty. Again, not trusting people a whole lot. So they don't tend to enter into a lot of like close relationships because they don't trust people around them. They don't trust that they have their best interest in mind or that they're going to be good people. They look for hidden meanings and things. And again, this has some things in common with schizophrenia. All 3 of these do. You can look at their schizoid, schizotypal, kind of sounds a little bit like schizophrenia. Like, so what you see with this is just this pattern of pervasive mistrust and paranoia across everything, just not quite as intense as someone with schizophrenia. And I have an example of this movie. It's an older movie called Conspiracy Theory. But the main character, what you'll see is he locks his door. And like he has quite a few locks on his door. He sets up like a little trap so he'll know if somebody broke in. He locks up his food on the chance that somebody might like get in there and contaminate it. He looks for like conspiracies and hidden meanings in newspapers. He mumbles a little bit, but I think you can still get the idea. Let me play this for you. I think it's a great right. He hits that bug right with his spatula and no problem hanging the spatula back up. Like that's not his button, right? He's paranoid, but he has no issues with that. I'm like, oh, I have issues with that, right? Instead, kind of brilliant to lock up your food. My kids could never steal my ice cream again if I did that, right? But a lot of work, right? A lot of work. Yeah.
He's typing photo report. Conspiracy theory.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Come from the name.
I know. Right. Just flat out conspiracy theory. Yeah, I mean, and you see him looking for conspiracies right in the paper, right? Like, why is the launch scheduled for here? Why is the president visiting Turkey, right? He's looking for like connections between those things. You see how his food is all locked up, like there's things locked in his house, right? But just all these like issues of paranoia, How long would it take me to get in here? Let me set up a trap in case someone gets in so I know. Just a lot of that, like very paranoid kind of stuff. And you see he's also very isolated, right? Living alone, working alone, because people often don't trust others when they have this disorder. So think about it again, very like schizophrenia, but not as intense and a little more global, starting earlier in life and across more circumstances. Schizoid, which sounds a lot like schizophrenia, right? We have that same beginning there. Schizoid and schizotype will have quite a bit of that schizophrenia-like stuff going on. With this one, we can write, we'll tend to have emotional coldness. They tend to have very minimal expression of emotion. So we could say a restricted range of emotion. And often very solitary by choice. Right, so this person oftentimes wants to be alone. They avoid relationships or have very few relationships. So as in general, right, this person has a lot of avoidance of people, very restricted emotion, a lot of coldness. They seldom marry. They might have a hard time with jobs that require them to work with other people. They don't form a lot of relationships. They might have some odd and eccentric behavior, though that's not always the case with this disorder, though there can be some odd kind of strange stuff going on. Really great example of this, Bruce Wayne in the new Batman movies would be somebody who's kind of like a classic schizoid personality disorder presentation, right? Very solitary, has some kind of like strange eccentric behavior, works in positions that allow him to work alone, doesn't have a lot of emotional expression, doesn't have a lot of close connections and ties. He has a couple, but not overly, very solitary and often by choice. So this person just tends to have very minimal, it's a lot of the like negative symptoms of schizophrenia, not a lot of emotion, not a lot of volition, not a lot of relationships, and so solitary by choice, preferring to be alone. Similar, but a little different, schizotypal. Schizotypal has a lot more like odd, like perceiving, odd distortions, sometimes hallucinations that can come with it. Odd forms of thinking and perceiving, very strange dress or behavior is pretty common. They might have odd thinking too, like thinking they have magical powers or the ability to control other people in some way, or like ESP-like abilities. So with this, we could put odd, eccentric, and peculiar. Odd, eccentric, peculiar behavior. Right, so a lot of like strange dress, strange behavior, tending to stand out pretty intensely. Some distortions, a lot of like cognitive distortions. Or strange perceptions. I have a story with this disorder, right? In high school, I had some very unique and interesting people that I hung out with, right? In my like sophomore year, I probably gave my parents a heart attack because my freshman year, I was like tied for valedictorian all the way at the top of the class. And then my sophomore year, I like hung out with a very different group of people and went like all the way down to the bottom of the class, right? My poor parents were probably like, what's happening? But one of the people that I knew in high school, everybody called knee pads. Her nickname was knee pads. And the reason for that is she wore knee pads and elbow pads to school every day. It's part of her normal clothing. She also wore a trench coat. And when those became banned, because this was at like the time of Columbine and trench coats were thought to be associated with like school shootings. So they banned trench coats. She wore a black sheet because it wasn't in the dress code. And she challenged that and won. So this person, just clothing wise, wore a black sheet as a cape, knee pads and elbow pads, tending to stand out. That's a little like odd and eccentric, peculiar already, but it gets one better than that. This individual, her name was Christy, right? She believed that she was half human, half dragon. Her human half was female and her dragon half was male. And she would walk around campus and randomly stop and try and sprout wings. So we'd be walking and she'd be like, try and sprout her dragon wings, right? I never saw dragon wings, but she would try. She would flick people with her imaginary dragon tail. Again, nothing ever happened, right? But she was always doing this. And she believed that the world was going to end. Again, some of these strange perceptions and beliefs that the world was going to end. And when it did, she would revert back to her dragon self and be able to fly away. Right. When she turned 18, she changed her name legally to her dragon name, Kaistarin something or other. I don't remember the whole thing, but she legally changed her name to her birth dragon name that she believed she had. And at the time, I just thought this was so fascinating. Now looking back on it, it's very clearly like schizotypal personality disorder, right? That odd magical beliefs, strange perceptions and thinking, really odd dress and behavior. She grew up in a family that was very violent, a lot of like fighting and like, marital discord. And so I think a lot of it came from that. But it's interesting thinking back on it now, right? Very classically, this is someone who tends to have some really strange beliefs about reality. And they stand out. They're a little bit odd. It doesn't always have to be that extreme, but I think it's a helpful example. You can just think of knee pads, like again, everywhere we go, just randomly trying to sprout those wings, which sadly never came out. Yeah. So I didn't hear the first part. So that
Her behavior though, it sounds more like it's just associated.
So it's more that she had strange beliefs, right? And so you can see the overlap with schizophrenia. There's some of those distortions, some of those delusions. To believe that you are a dragon is delusion, right? Like you kind of lost contact with reality. That's not a grounded belief. And so you can see the overlap more with schizophrenia and strange hallucinatory delusional thought rather than dissociating. But I think that was her escape, was to create this other reality and a way to escape from her being. Yeah, not a separate identity, right? But more of a delusion that she was half and half. Versus if she created an alternate identity that she switched into, then it would be more like dissociative identities. I love that you're thinking about the different. I think that's fantastic. Yeah, I don't. And I tried so hard a few years ago to find her because I was like, and that was an interesting like rabbit hole to go down too. But I was trying to find her because I was so curious. Like, I mean, I knew this individual for a year and then it was too much for me. It was really bizarre. Like I was so fascinated by it for a time. And I tried really hard to find her, but yeah, I don't, which is too bad. I would love to know what happened to her. I'm so curious, right? And no luck. Yeah. When they what? Right. I don't know. Right. Yeah. Right. She was somebody who stood out, right? Like everyone knew who she was. I had a degree of safety as her friend. Like no one would mess with this person. Couldn't have been safer in the world, right? I mean, she was terrifying, and she was like a multiple degree black belt too. So she was like, you don't mess with this person at all, right? She would carry like random weapons around. Like she got in trouble all the time for that. Yeah, I was very safe as her friend, and then like very careful when we weren't friends anymore. I have another example of this, not as severe, but I think another strange beliefs. A very, like I said, very sweet person, but still very like kind of odd, right? And that tends to be the defining characteristic here, is those strange perceptions and beliefs. Now, there's no like clear line. The difficult thing here with all of these, especially these bottom two and this one that we're talking about now, is that a lot of people have like odd or strange behavior. And how do we decide what is disordered versus just a little like off the normal path? There isn't a clear line for that. So where we tend to draw that line as best we can is when it starts to affect them socially or in terms of their work or in relationships and so on. When people become isolated out and lonely, and sometimes this individual can be very lonely, right? They want to have relationships with other people, but this odd, peculiar, eccentric stuff isolates them out, right? And you definitely see that at times with all three of these, but especially with this last one. This middle individual more wants to avoid relationships, but the top and bottom ones can be intensely lonely because they want to have contact. They just don't trust people, or they tend to push people away unintentionally. So all three of these are the odd, anxious and odd kind of disorders. Any other like stories or questions or anything else here before, see if we can do one more before we're done today, but anything else here at all? The next group are the dramatic personality disorders. And on this slide are the two probably most difficult of all personality disorders. Antisocial and borderline personality disorder are both on this slide. And we'll talk about antisocial and then we'll probably stop there for today. But antisocial personality disorder tends to go by two common names. Anyone know what they are? The common names for antisocial personality disorder? What was that? Okay, good guess. Anyone? Is that a hand yet? Okay, you're almost there. You have half the word. Yeah. Yep, antisocial, but it has two common names. Yeah. Yeah, so it's a sociopath or a psychopath, right? So if you've ever heard someone be called a sociopath or a psychopath, the technical name for that is antisocial personality disorder. Psychopath and sociopath are just common terms for this, and they refer to proposed causes and patterns in the ways this can manifest. But the technical name for both of those is antisocial personality disorder. So someone like Dexter or Joffrey or the Joker, there's so many examples of this. A lot of famous serial killers as well. If they are sociopaths or psychopaths, technically we call that antisocial personality disorder. Now, antisocial is different than asocial, and they're confused a lot of the time. Asocial is somebody who is introverted. They're not social. They don't like to be around other people. Versus antisocial is when you have a lack of regard for others, right? And so you don't tend to have any consideration for others at all. And that is much more the case with this disorder. You see this pattern of kind of violent, criminal, and unethical behavior, exploiting and manipulating people, and not feeling any empathy or remorse for your actions. Yeah. It can, right? There can be a connection there. You actually have to show evidence of this from a very young age. So you have to have either oppositional defiant disorder or conduct disorder. So basically, as a child, you have to show acting out tendencies or refusal to follow the rules. And then you cannot diagnose this till 18. So sometimes with reactive attachment disorder, you see some of those similar traits. So it could be connected or not, right? You could definitely see that being maybe kind of like a precursor to it for some anyway. So very strict rule with this one. You have to be 18 to be diagnosed with this. Let me put this up here. So antisocial, again, commonly known as being a psychopath or a sociopath. So here are things that we could write: failure to respect lawful behaviors. Well, often with this disorder, feel like they're above the law, right? Or they enjoy breaking the law, right? They don't respect lawful behaviors, often criminal, unethical behavior. It doesn't always have to be violent, but there is a lot of violence associated with this disorder. A lot of lying, conning, and deceit. This person tends to be very manipulative, but on the surface, very charming and charismatic. If any of you have watched Dexter, right, he knows, for example, probably one of the more famous portrayals of this, he knows what he's supposed to do to seem normal. It's very surface level stuff, right? But underneath that, he murders people. He doesn't have empathy. He doesn't have this understanding and this genuine feeling for other people. There's a lot of lying and conning and deceit. Hannibal, another great example, Hannibal Lecter, very charismatic and charming, brutally ruthless underneath that, right? So on the surface, this individual can seem very charming and very kind and friendly, but it's usually a very superficial front, almost like a persona. We could also add the other really big one here. There's a lack of guilt or remorse. So oftentimes violent, criminal, unethical behavior, and then they don't feel bad about it. There is no guilt or no remorse for violating another person's rights or feelings or harming another individual. Again, this person might oftentimes end up in jail for some of their violent and criminal, unethical activity. There's also a part of this that we don't tend to talk about a lot, and that is the lack of empathy that this individual tends to have. People who have antisocial personality disorder don't tend to have a lot of close relationships because they struggle to put themselves in somebody else's shoes. They are not very good typically at having empathy or understanding for another person. And I have a little clip of that. It's just about like a minute or so long, but it shows like a montage of Dexter in situations where he has no empathy or understanding of what the other person is saying. That is very, very characteristic of this disorder. Let me play.